Oh, that's such a great question. At one, I would have said to myself, what you're envisioning is very possible. And it is not a crazy dream that you write books, tell stories, and get paid to talk about those same stories that you wrote.
Yes.
And so that would be like encouragement. I would have started sooner on
Mm.
social media presence, to be honest, because had I kept track of everything I was doing to build the career that I have right now, I think it would have, one, been really helpful to others. But also so much of today it's sad, but a lot of opportunities come from how many people follow you and blah, 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 blah. And especially now that I'm getting into TV and film, that's a question that comes up a lot. And it's a part of our resume. If
Yes.
not more important than our resume is our social media at this point.
You're listening to Madam Speaker Says, your no fluff cheat code to becoming the voice everyone listens to. I'm your host, Machochodi. If you've been waiting for a permission slip to straighten your crown and take up space like you invented the blueprint, Madam Speaker Says got you covered. No whispers, no apologies, just you, me, and some bold ass moves. Let's get into it. Welcome here to Madam Speaker Says. I am your host, Machochodi, and I am beyond thrilled for our conversation today. We are speaking to somebody who is the epitome of what it means to be a thought leader. And she is also, the thing that excites me so much about this particular guest is she is the kind of thought leader our grandmothers would have been proud of, right? She is the kind of thought leader who makes our brains bigger and also our hearts well up and just fill with love and gratitude that there is a voice like this speaking our truths. But let's not play any games. Our homegirl also gets us to action, okay? She's not here just to sound pretty, although she does, and to look pretty, and also to like spill the real tea. But she is somebody who connects the dots and makes it plain to us why it's so important for us to take our thought leadership seriously. So the very first question I have for you, first
Oh
of
my
all,
goodness. First of all, thank you. Before we even get to the question, that was such a beautiful introduction. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
it's such an honor to have you, Anna Malaika Tubbs. This is our guest. And the very first question I have for you, and I want to contextualize this question because it is very much informed by your book and your brilliance. One of the things that struck me as I went through Erased is how profoundly you help us understand that the United States is a work in progress
Mhm.
that was created by thought leaders who were men, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
we are still, how many generations later? We're talking about like 400 years later, and we are still living under the creation, the imagination of these founding figures, quote unquote. Those are the words that are typically used. You could also just say a couple of dudes who were thought leaders of the time. And I'm really curious, why is it important for us to take thought leadership seriously, thinking about those particular thought leaders vis-a-vis your first book, which was also about thought leaders, but of a completely different kind. The
Mhm.
three mothers, the mothers of these lauded, rightfully so, globally celebrated fathers of a different kind. These freedom fighters, right? We think of Dr. MLK, we think of James Baldwin, and we think of Malcolm X, and not specifically them, which is so fascinating. You didn't center them. We'll get into that. You center their mothers, and you center their mothers as thought leaders. So, my question to you is, why is thought leadership so important? But thinking at the back of our head as we're listening to her answer, here's two different models of what thought leaders could be.
That is such a beautiful question. Oh my goodness, this interview is going to be incredible. How we're getting started. I am so excited about this whole conversation. So, yes, in Erased, I'm talking about the fact that we really do just have to pay attention to the system and how it was originally designed. And when we study that, we become a lot less surprised by what we're witnessing to this day, what we've seen throughout American history. So if we look back at 1776, when our founding fathers won the Revolutionary War, and they were the underdogs, it was very surprising that they won. People weren't expecting this. And because of that, this revolutionary spirit was spreading across the nation. And so there were others who were thinking, if they could do this, what else can we do? What else can we accomplish? And with that knowledge, these founding fathers were very fearful that other people were going to try to keep power away from them again or try to take that power away from them. And so, with that awareness, they design our nation wanting to keep power within their own hands. And so, our founding fathers write the Constitution and they decide who is going to get to be treated as a human being in the United States. So when they're saying liberty and justice for all, we are aware that they weren't referring to every human being. They were being very specific about who got to have access to these opportunities and to resources. And so the Constitution tells us that men were going to be able to vote, and men could own land, and men didn't need anybody else to speak for them. They could represent themselves. We know that women are completely excluded from the Constitution, and we know that these thought leaders, these founding fathers, believed that women were supposed to be controlled, they were supposed to be docile, they were supposed to be obedient, and they were not by any means supposed to participate politically. They also believed that women were supposed to simply reproduce the status and the power of men through children. So this was their vision. This is how they thought about the organization of their nation. And we know from this very problematic binary that they're setting up that is already very limited and clearly is excluding anybody who is non-binary, for example, that they're also excluding people who were enslaved at the time. They were also excluding poor white people in a lot of ways. They were also excluding indigenous people, as well as any immigrants from that point forward, as well as people who were disabled. There were all these different people that they're clearly not including in these definitions of what it means to be human in the United States. But what I want more people to understand is that this was simply a thought. This was story
Mm.
that they told, and that through the laws and through the systems that came out of that vision, they were able to make that story and that vision and that thought a reality. And in order to make something that isn't actually naturally the order and isn't divine seem as if it is, you have to have certain tactics in place so that other people believe that vision and believe that thought. And so we see consequences for people that stand up against their definition of what it means to be human beings. We see laws again in place that explicitly write this vision and this thought leadership into our documents and into our systems. And so that is really what we've been up against all along. But you've also consistently seen people from the founding of this nation see it for what it is and see that it is made up and see that we can always envision beyond that. And other thought leaders, for this context in this conversation, you could think about them as other thought leaders who believed that we could actually eventually accomplish a nation where everybody truly was recognized as a human being who deserves dignity and deserves access to opportunity and access to resources. And so that is the story of the United States of America. It's one specific thought that has led our nation in many ways, as well as those who have been able to call it out for what it is and have introduced new thought and who have progressed our nation in so many incredible ways. And we haven't seen progress in the US because those who believed in that original vision of the founding fathers just woke up one day and decided, actually, I've changed my mind. I would like to give rights to more people. That's not how it went. It was because others, with their minds, with their bodies, with their
Mhm.
blood, sweat, and tears, and also as storytellers, were
Mhm.
showing that we could accomplish something else. And so we are always able to go back and track that particular tug of war between
Mm.
thought. And the way that I summarize it is one side saw that not, or believed that not everybody should be treated as a human being, and the other side has. And we're trying to get us closer to that recognition on a national level. And so to kind of close the loop and bring it to the three mothers, they and their sons fall squarely in this group on this side
Yes.
saying, we deserve to be recognized as human beings, and our children deserve to be treated and recognized as human beings. Black women are the only ones in American history
Mhm.
who, by law, were told that they were not human beings and that their children were somebody else's property. We are the only group where that has been written into law that our children were not human, but they were somebody else's property. And with that, Black women have always been able to see beyond what that vision has offered us and have always fought for this nation to reflect their vision instead. And so for me, in celebrating Alberta King, Bertus Baldwin, and Louise Little with my first book, it was really a celebration of the way in which Black mothers have consistently done this throughout American history. And not only biological mothers, we have our foremothers, we have our community mothers, we have our aunties.
Mhm.
That really is at the core of our work and the ways we raise our children and the ways we love them and speak life into them despite being told that they were not alive, that they were somebody else's thing.
Mm.
Always been our honor and legacy to say that differently and to claim our humanity as well as everybody else's as a result of that.
I love this. And there's two things that I want to call out. Number one, I just want to ask you explicitly. So, are you saying, from what I heard, that these three mothers were basically just BS callers? Like they saw BS and they called it out? Because
Yeah,
you said something fantastic. You said Black moms have always, from the very start, been like, yo, we see through this game. Like, we see through the jig, and the jig is nonsense. We can see that the emperor has no clothes.
right.
And one of the things that I'm emphatic that a really powerful thought leader has to be somebody who tells the truth. And I
Yeah,
am curious, that's going to be my next question. What makes a really powerful thought leader? But one of the things that I want to call out that you said is these women, these three particular women,
yeah,
right? But also, we're talking about a chorus that has existed since before 1776
yeah,
of women who were just like, excuse me?
exactly. No, excuse
I
me, but
called, yes, excuse me? No.
I hear what you're saying. Doesn't make sense. We don't like it. We're going to do something.
Nothing, nothing, honey.
And truly, yes, without minimizing the
Of
incredible
course.
courage that that takes and the work that that takes, at
Yes.
the core of it, that's what it is. Are
Yeah.
you on the side of I believe this BS, or are you on the side of I don't believe it and I need to help more people see it for what it is? And I also need to have this reflected on a national level. I need to change policy. I need
Yes.
to run for office. I need to make sure my children are fully aware of what they're up against and make sure that they're not defined by this myopic view of humanity. And when I think of the three mothers, I often talk about these tenets of Black motherhood that emerged when I was writing about them. They are all so incredibly different from each other. Alberta King, Bertus Baldwin, Louise Little, they're very different from each other. And I wanted to make sure that I emphasized that in the book because so often Black women are not represented, but if we are, it's as if we are a monolith. So when I'm saying these things, it's not because I'm saying we're all exactly the same, but there are some things that unify us and that come out of this incredibly rich diversity of experience of Black womanhood.
Mhm.
Those unifying factors are number one, in all three of them, I saw that they were very aware of the ugliness their children would come up against. And they didn't have a choice as to whether or not they were going to prepare their children for that ugliness. As Black mothers and mothers of Black children, you cannot allow them to just go out into the world without knowing that there are going to be certain people who can be dangerous and
Yes.
who see them differently. And we have different ways of teaching our children that, right? And at different stages and when these talks will happen. But the second part of that, which is happening at the exact same time, is telling our children that they cannot be defined by that, that that is just somebody's thought and that it isn't truth. And in fact, not only is it not truth, it's ridiculous. And we need our children to know that. We then, third, have to show our children how we have stood up to that ridiculousness throughout our own lives. So all three of the mothers are teaching their children, as well as, their famous sons, but all their children, this is how we have stood up as a family. Bertis Baldwin was a writer. She loved showing people how to make it through the darkness in their lives through the letters that she would write them, how to confront the pains that they could find healing, how they could find light, especially at a time when Jim Crow reigned supreme. And Alberta King believed in marches and in boycotts, and she believed in the fact that faith is always intertwined with social justice, that you couldn't pull those two apart. So that's what she teaches her children. And
Surprise, surprise, spoiler alert.
I didn't tell you who her child was. You would know. And Louise Little was this radical activist. I always call her badass, for people who really want to
Crystal.
have more.
Crystal. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. People who want more of these, Black women to study throughout history who just really gave no Fs about the oppressor and said, we're going to stand up for ourselves by any means necessary. Louise Little is one of these people. And she teaches her kids that you organize, that you stand up to injustice, that it would be better to die fighting
Mm.
injustice than to live accepting oppression. And so she shows them multiple times. She's very willing to risk her life for them to never bow down to
Mm.
the oppressor. So
Mm.
this is that third tenet. You show them how we've come up against this in the past. This is not new. So when you experience it, know our strategies, know the tools that we've pulled on, that our ancestors have pulled on and pulled from. And the final part of that is to remind them simply that they are supposed to love and live and
Mhm.
thrive. And it's not only about this battle. Our lives are not only about responding to other people's, again, myopic views of who we are. It's actually to continue to live no matter what they're trying to do. Because again, you're just calling it out for what it is. It's BS.
Yeah.
It's made up. And it doesn't keep us from understanding the magnitude of the horrific parts of this,
Yeah.
right? These three women
Yes.
knew how dangerous it could become, but they also made sure their kids knew their lives were not simply about responding to these other people. That's not where
Right.
our purpose began. Our purpose was to live
Mm.
and to be joyful and to make our way through this pain. And I always say they weren't raising their children thinking that they were going to become these incredible civil rights leaders. They weren't raising them to become icons. They were simply raising them to live and to be creative and to call out anybody who tried to keep them from doing so.
Okay. Like mic drop. Okay. Mic drop. This podcast, the episode is done, basically, because we are sitting in on a masterclass, right? Of what it means to take what the most brilliant minds and thought leaders, our grandmothers, what they have laid at the table for us. And what I really want to hone in on what you're saying, Anna, because everything that you have just laid out is exactly the playbook for how we face our times right now. I don't need to remind you that we are living in an unprecedented, not just US, but global seismic crisis. There
Hmm.
is no leadership. And when there is leadership, it is scary AF. Like we're out in these streets and people are stressed out, rightfully. People feel unmoored, right? And they feel this element of like, but how does my little voice matter and stand up against these things that are constantly coming at me? We have school shootings, we have genocide, we have a president who is completely derailed. And
Yeah.
these are happening all at the same time and coming at people constantly. And I want to give an underline to what you've just said. Recognize the ugliness, call it for what it is, understand you're not defined by it. Show like what do you like you got to do something, right? We've got to do something to defy the things that are crazy that we know are BS.
Yeah.
And the last thing that you said, which is so powerful, is that bit about loving and light and remembering that we're not here just for the struggle. In
Yeah.
South Africa, the way that we talk about it is, you even sometimes hear people saying, I was born into the struggle, which
Mm.
is an affirmation of our charge and what is ours to do in our lifetime. But
Mm.
like your parents did not give birth to you to put you at the stake. Your parents
Yeah.
gave birth to you because you are divine, because you are part of a long ancestral line that has so much more to do with life
Yes.
than some white supremacist understanding and interruption of that line, right?
Exactly.
I
Yes.
I want to ask you, I think you've already begun answering it. What makes an excellent and the kind of thought leader that you look up to? You've already started describing these three women, right? And if there's examples who are contemporary, I welcome that. But I'm really curious for you when you think of somebody who shapes our culture, because that essentially is what a thought leader does.
Yeah.
What are the traits? What are the qualities? And also, here's something that is really fascinating to me from what you just said: thought,
Mm.
the understanding and the appreciation of the power of thought, that this isn't something that is just fleeting and you have an idea that's really powerful, but we don't put tactics, another word that you use, tactics and strategy behind thought.
Mm-hmm. Such a good question. And I will say, as much as right now feels so horrific, right? Because not only are these things happening, we can see them happening, right? We have access to social media, we have access to information, right? At this rapid rate that we haven't throughout humanity been able to see pain across the world in this way.
Yes.
But I also think there's a lot of people who feel really hopeless right now because they're believing the narrative, and especially in the United States, that things have, quote, never been this bad before. And I disagree
Mhm.
with that. I don't think that in the US we can claim that. And I mainly say that because of my first book. I studied these three Black women who were born in the early 1900s, who lived through Jim Crow, who lived through two world wars, who lived through the Great Depression, who experienced and saw lynchings all around them, whose children were born in the 1920s. They participated in their own civil rights movement before their kids do, and two of them saw their children shot. And so for me, we do have to ground ourselves in these times are very scary. And we've also been shown over and over again examples of people who are willing to stand up during these scary times, who believe that we have no other option, who for them pessimism is a luxury that they couldn't afford, and who were always focused on realizing their vision despite the challenges that seemed completely insurmountable. Two of these three women lived long enough to see the first episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Right.
What they saw. And I talk about Berta Baldwin, who was born in 1903, and she overlaps at the beginning of her life with Harriet Tubman. And at the end of her life, she doesn't pass away until 1999, if I'm not confusing the years, but somewhere around the 1990s, she overlaps with me. I was born in 1992. So if on one end of her life, she's at contemporary with
Oh,
Tubman,
I mean, like,
that's how recent this history is in the United States. And so I just think there's a lot of Americans, especially, who really believe, whoa, this is the worst it's ever been, and I'm so scared, and there's nothing I can do. And I want to move more of us away from that mentality and more into strategize, study how we've fought before, how we've resisted before. How did somebody like Berta Baldwin witness this much in her lifetime? So, what is it that we're supposed to not only witness, but participate in our lifetime? Yes, this is very scary, but what's our Oprah Winfrey moment? You know what I'm saying?
let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about our pop culture moment because Cardi B just dropped some serious wisdom exactly to your point. Cardi B was in an interview with Gayle King, and she's talking exactly about this, right?
Yeah.
What her grandmothers went through and what is hers to do in this lifetime. I mean, I think the contextualization that you're giving us is so beautiful because, yes, it is for a lot of people, Anna, I think it is the first time that they're called upon to do
Yes,
something that feels
exactly.
uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
one of the markers of being a really powerful thought leader when you're telling the truth, you're going to be uncomfortable
Yep.
and better believe you're going to make other people feel uncomfortable,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
What I thought was so beautiful about how Cardi makes it real for people is look, if my grandmother could do what she did with
Yep.
like nothing, with
Yeah.
like serious constraints.
Yes.
If Malcolm X's mom could be institutionalized for
Mm-hmm.
7 years?
5 years. Yeah.
Basically almost the equivalent to how long Nelson Mandela was put away,
Yep.
institutionalized
Yep.
for what she believes in standing up against white supremacy. And we're asking you to speak up at the meeting, and that's difficult.
Yep. Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. And I think you put that so
Come
beautifully.
on.
That's so beautifully that the thing that is unprecedented is not the level of pain that we're seeing across the world, sadly. Like, I hate to say that, and I'm not minimizing how horrific it is right
Yes.
now, because I agree it's horrible.
Yes.
And this is the time to really understand legacies of resistance. If you're
Mm.
feeling hopeless, you need to go and study the people who stood up because that's who we are called to be right now. And so, what it is unprecedented is that for many of us, this is the first time we're being called to do something. And so we feel like, oh no, this has never happened and we don't know what to do.
Mm.
No, it's happened. And we need to go and get ready and we need to strategize and we need to decide what role we're going to play in this. And so, to answer your question about who the leaders are and what are those characteristics that I look up to and those who inspire me the most, it's the people who can call out the BS, the people who have such clarity, um,
Mm.
no matter what distractions are coming up, and who are giving us the tools that we all need to follow so that we can find our place in this battle, this fight. And so for me, I think many have passed, but I will also give some contemporary examples. Asata Shakur, who just
Yes.
rest in peace. Toni Morrison was another
Yes.
incredible, just clear thinker and writer. Alice Walker, who we still have. I think that they just really showed that they were unapologetic. Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde. If you read their works, they're just telling you their opinion. They're really, a lot of it is very stream of conscious writing where they're just saying this is what we're coming up against and you have to really be grounded. And let me break it down for you so you understand how we move forward from this. And more contemporary people, Stacey Abrams, a perfect example of somebody who had a vision for what could be done, who saw something as it was constructed, who saw the policies and laws and barriers and had this insurmountable task, seemingly so, where she believed she could turn Georgia blue. And so many people saying to her, there's no way that's ever going to happen. What a
You're
crazy.
crazy. You
That's
are literally bananas.
yeah. And then she did it. And now we have elections where we're curious what's going to happen in Georgia.
Mm.
That is mind blowing. And I think the thing that happens is when we have these mind blowing accomplishments, we then just think, oh, well, that must have been easy. It's
Or
the same
it's
thing how
normal. It normalizes something that was a complete outlier bananas idea, right?
completely. We
Yeah.
have to remember how crazy it was to ever think there could be a black president or a black first lady. So we have to center ourselves in these were all things that seemed impossible. So we have to believe that we can achieve those same things. So for me, because I spent so much time abroad, I grew up nomadically, and you and I talked a little bit about this, that the global mindset of this is also really important because I can come to the United States and say, hey, I think we really should have get rid of guns in the
Mhm.
United States.
Mhm.
And there's plenty of people who would say that is never going to happen in the United States.
Mhm.
That is a wild thought. I don't think that that's that wild of a thought. I actually think we really could accomplish that. Healthcare for all, for example, or universal childcare that is quality and affordable, and people realizing how much better that is for our economy.
Hello. Hello.
Women having access to midwives and having the option to deliver their children in the ways that they want to. There's just, these are things that some people would say, never, never, that could never, ever happen. And the leaders that I'm most inspired by are those that look at those challenges and say, watch me. Here we go. And so I think it's no coincidence that most of the people I look up to are Black women. And
Mhm.
it goes back to something we said at the beginning. If the system and that original vision never served you, and in fact completely excluded you and cast you away from it, you were always aware that we could do something different.
Yes.
And so that is a legacy that we are a part of, and I'm so grateful to be a part of. And
Yes.
I think more people, those who feel like these are unprecedented times and who, for the first time, are being called to do something, now's the time to study those who have always been grounded in this knowledge.
I'm so struck by what you're saying, and especially struck by the connection points, right? Between you as a human being, as a person, a woman in the world. At some point, you were a girl. And what you're asking all of us to kind of confront, which is this moment where you're called.
Yeah.
And I'm curious for you if we go all the way back. You know, one of the things in preparing for this that I was so moved by is this quote. You're going to have to tell me where it comes from, but about the quote is, please correct me where I butcher it. When a child is born, a world is born.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
were born in 1994?
1992.
1992, which for me immediately takes me to such a specific time and place in the world. Like
Yeah.
1992, I know exactly which desk I was sitting in Johannesburg, the only little black girl surrounded
Wow.
by a sea of white people. South Africa is still under apartheid. Nelson
Wow.
Mandela has just come out of jail, and here you are, born.
Mm-hmm.
Walk us through the moments that felt like these were the makings of my thought leadership. These were the makings of me feeling like I'm being called to something.
Yeah. Well, first, the beautiful quote is a June Jordan quote.
King
Um,
Jordan, that's
and I
right.
paraphrase it all the time myself because I now don't also remember the order of the words, but basically she's saying that every time a child is born, the world begins again.
Hmm.
And I think I quote her in both my books, actually, because it was so relevant to everything I was saying in both, but that Black women often see our role in mothering very differently than other groups, especially the United States, where others have often spoken about motherhood as the reproduction of patriarchy. Um,
Hmm.
and that a lot of, feminist thinkers have told women don't do it, don't have kids, because this is the thing that's
Mhm.
keeping us in this cycle.
Mhm.
As a result of Black women, again, being pushed out of the benefits of American patriarchy, is how I describe it. Um, Black women have seen our mothering very differently, and we've seen it in this same vein of this June Jordan quote, where we see it as the opportunity to usher in a new world and to see our children as those who are bringing us that new world. So if we're feeling like the nation is in a hopeless state, that every child born right now could be ushering in, not could be, but are ushering in a new world, a new way of doing things.
Can I just pause you? I have such chills with you saying that.
Mm,
It is it is such a divine thing that you are calling attention to. We're both moms. We both have young children. We're also daughters. And
mm.
I know you have African heritage.
Yes,
You're
Ghanaian.
Ghanaian. I'm South African. I want to put a fine print on what it means and how deeply, deeply,
Yeah.
deeply braided
Yes,
in African spirituality what
absolutely.
you're saying is, and that these women in the diaspora and beyond the United States, right? Like Brazil has the biggest population of Black people, that
Mm,
these Black women have
yes.
raised their babies to be like, no, actually, you're not a continuation of patriarchy.
Mm.
You are the beginning of a brand new world because you come from our ancestors and they wouldn't send us crazy.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, even to call, like you said, on African spirituality, obviously Africa is so huge, but when I'm
Yes.
thinking of West African spirituality specifically and the original kind of belief system and religion, it was very feminist, very inclusive, even of non-binary identities. Like this was robbed from us. This was taken from us. It was also very celebratory of children's spirits, that
Yes.
the spirits that come into our children
Yes.
either are reincarnated, right,
Yes.
from past ancestors who have come with such knowledge and are here to share messages with us and tell us more about God and spirituality than we could ever teach them. And there's many cultures that believe this, that when you look at a child, see them as the wisest among us. And the way we think about that in the United States and in these cultures that have been so deeply colonized and led by colonizers is so separate from that. And so instead, we're taught in the US to really tell our children what they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to do things. And we get them on schedules and we tell them to deny their intuition. And it's just so contrary to a lot of the original belief systems of this world, and particularly African belief systems. And so I think it's something that I have found myself really wanting to study more and return to understand this even better, because that's what I'm naturally called more to. And I feel more connected to this, and realizing and saying it, this is just because it's from where we're from and what's within us, because that is a tradition that was carried forward. And really seeing our children as a part of this longer fight and this longer reclamation of our lives, and believing that even in the future we might come back into our own families and continue this fight even
Yes.
further down the line. And so that is why, like you asked earlier about calling, and when we feel called to do something, I have always felt this very strong connection to my intuition
Mm.
as well as those who came before me. And I, for so long, really thought about it more as, whatever the God is that we believe in, from whatever faith we all practice, that I was being kind of told these are the ideas that are being placed on my heart and on my mind because there was something I was supposed to do about them. I don't believe that I get ideas for books or for talks just for the sake of it. I don't believe that at all. I believe that I have ideas because I'm supposed to do something as quickly as possible. And I say that because the amount of ideas that come to me
Yes.
that are constant and that And I've known since I was little. I could kind of see a little bit about, you can speak to so many people and you can connect people and you can tell stories that allow people to understand each other better and to relate to each other more. And the experiences that my parents were giving me of traveling from country to country abroad with their work and with their jobs that allowed me to see humanity everywhere and in everyone, and also that allowed me to celebrate our differences. I
Hmm.
was never taught that, all humans are the exact same, but that in fact we're very different from each other, and that is where the strength of any group lies, is that diversity, is that richness of experiences, and that we're supposed to learn from each other. That's a part of our purpose here, is to learn with our contemporaries. And so whenever I see people who have discomfort with difference or who feel that they can't talk to each other about even disagreements, I feel called to do something about that. And so that's translated into my work in a variety of ways, but particularly, I have always wanted to communicate with as many people as possible. And so I knew even when I was getting my PhD that any work that I produce will be accessible to everybody. I am not somebody who will communicate with academic jargon
Yeah.
and performance of intellectualism.
Mm.
And it's not that I dumb things down because
Mm.
I don't believe that
Yeah.
anybody needs me to dumb it down. I mainly just want to write in a way that is more universal. And I think knowing from the moment, yeah, I thought I can write and here are stories I have to tell when I was little has really carried forward even to this day. I feel like that's what I'm called to do is bring more people together to understand what we're actually up against. And it's not each other. It's
Oh,
these systems that have been put in place by typically insecure men. And how can we, instead of blaming each other and pointing fingers, have our energy more focused on building new ways of living with each other?
yes, 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 yes. And one of the things that I love from your website is you describe yourself as a storyteller. And what I'm hearing in what you're saying now is exactly that, right? You
Yeah.
know, Anna, one of the things that is remarkable about your personal journey, I mean, anybody would be impressed. Undergrad, Stanford, then go on to Cambridge. You have a master's, you have a PhD. We're talking about somebody who has all of the receipts in academia. And I don't, I can't put enough of a fine print on this that you are committed to your stories being digested by the people. Those
Yeah.
ideas, those thoughts, those stories are supposed to fuel, right? It's supposed to be jet fuel for these people to do something about it.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the work of thought leadership. That is the work of, okay, cool. I have this expertise. I know some things. I've hit the stacks, but let me think about the different ways of how can I get this information to people. You
Yeah.
have books out. You have spoken on the TED stage. I know you have some cinema work that you're at work on. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit to us about what the experience of being a storyteller is, and thinking about all of these different platforms that you get to play in, and also bringing people in, like peeling a little bit of the curtain back, because
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is really problematic and part of how and why we remain erased is
Mm.
we also discount our stories.
Yeah.
And it's not just about tell your story, write the book, because
Hmm.
that's to, like, both of us are authors. Nobody here is going to tell you don't write the book.
Yeah.
But it's really understanding, your thought leadership can live in so many different ways. And it's
Yeah.
a business.
Yes.
End of
Yes.
the
Yes.
day, thought leadership is a business. People are making money. You should be making money from the intellectual property coming out of your head.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, so many good points to cover there, though. So beautiful. And thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate them.
Absolutely.
It Yes, I think, at least again, my calling is not to just work for the sake of doing work. There's a lot of really great academics who spend their time doing deep research, but who then produce writing that most people will never see.
Yes.
And for me, that's just not what motivates me to tell stories. And the reason I started shifting away solely from the word author, I'm proud to be an author, don't get me wrong, but adding in storyteller was that I realized that I tell stories in a lot of different ways and that I have ideas that come to me, right? This, like, again, all these ideas just like flooding my brain all the time, that aren't actually fitting in the nonfiction,
Mhm.
heavily researched category. And those ideas include when I give talks, those ideas include, fireside chats where I'm sitting with audience members and we're really
Um,
engaging.
just low key, fireside chat she means with, President Barack Obama. No big deal. Keep going, please.
That was epic. I'm not gonna lie.
Just a casual, super cash fireside.
I have had such incredible opportunities that really truly, I mean, when you talk about things that you never thought could happen, that was wild. But yes, President Barack Obama being one of them, doing fireside chats with those incredible people, interviewing people is also a part of storytelling, like what you're doing. It's not always that we're telling our story, it's also how are we helping other people tell their story, and sharing that story with other people as well. And also, children's books. I started to think of a lot of different ideas, especially once I had kids, and I'm sitting there reading these books and thinking, oh, I have such a great idea for that. And we really do need to be talking to our children about all of these
Yes.
concepts and these liberatory practices as soon as possible. So hopefully my children's book gets sold at some point.
I'm buying. Put me on
Thank
the
you.
free list.
Thank you. I'm like, agent, let's
So,
get it sold. I love my agent so much. She's amazing. And I flood her with too many ideas as well. But, and then, yeah, even, podcasts and these kinds of interviews, as well as TV and film. And it's really interesting because I think had I grown up in LA, or in other kind of entertainment hubs, I probably would have come to TV and film sooner, but I just wasn't aware that it was something that I could do. And I know this is obviously, we talked a little bit about how audience members, many are at a stage where we have ideas, but we don't know how to get there and what to do. And some things feel really unattainable. They feel just so far away from our experience. I think one of the reasons I got a PhD is that my parents were lawyers. I knew that if I got degrees, I could probably get my stories out there, that maybe that would be a way that I could do it. But I was always really fascinated by movies, TV. But those writers seemed like these extraordinary beings that I could never exist in the same realm of. And then when we moved to LA, my husband and I moved here in 2021. And I was just meeting people like I do. I love meeting people and asking people questions, and I'm comfortable in any room, and realized that I could do that. I could do the same thing that they were doing. And in fact, in LA, because there's so many screenwriters here, they're very amazed by authors. They're like, what you do is so much harder. And that it was the experience that I was having at a distance, thinking that they were out of my reach. They were treating me that way, thinking, writing a book is so much harder and longer and all these things. And I thought, wow, I've really been telling myself this narrative of, you are a storyteller, but in a lane, a specific lane. And now, and especially also when The Three Mothers became a bestseller, that was also this crazy moment because that also felt this like a dream. This thing that, wow, how incredible this would be if that happened. And when it hit the list, which took a year. Like I worked so hard. So not to make it seem like poof and then it happened, but more so I could see that if I really applied myself and worked really hard and put all of my effort into something, that it was very attainable. And then it happened. And so then I thought, oh, I've almost been dreaming too small so far.
Mm.
And I can expand those dreams, and I can look at all these other ways to get these messages out there. And why not do all of these things? And especially if my goal is to communicate with as many people as possible, TV and film will get a lot of people involved who might not pick up a book. And the final thing I'll say about that is that we are in an era of social media. And so this is a part of the branding that you talked about where I was coming more into my storytelling identity, but I was mainly leaving that to those who picked up my books and those who came to my talks and who could make it to these events. But every time someone came to an event, somebody would say to me, you need to get this in a reel or you need to get this
Mm,
online.
mm,
More people
mm.
will want to hear what you have to say. Or this thing that you said today, this one sentence was so helpful to me.
Yes.
Can you put that online? I want to share that with somebody.
Yes.
And I realized there were all these moments that I was missing capturing that could also help other people understand how to have the same career as me. I
Mhm.
wasn't giving any trace of
Mm.
so, for instance, when the President Obama moment happens and I post, oh, there's a picture of me and
Yes.
President Obama.
Just, super cat hanging out.
And so many friends said to me, friends of mine who know me well said, how did that happen? And then I thought, oh, they have no idea that
Yes.
I do interviews all the time, that I host events like I'm the MC of events all the time. But I
Mm.
wasn't branding it. I wasn't showing people that. And so it seemed like out of nowhere, I got this incredible opportunity. And so
Right.
that's something that I'm working on. I am a work in progress. I'm also still learning to be less nervous about these kinds of things because
Mhm.
reels feel so nerve-wracking to me. They feel very vulnerable. You're just
You know, okay, we can all appreciate this because here's the queen of gliding on the TED Red stage in red, looking gorgeous and just owning the stage. And this is the same woman who gets nervous in front of a reel. Okay, like make it make sense. What's the math? But
it's so true.
I also think this is so important, and I appreciate you saying this because for a lot of our listeners, just listening to you right now will sound like this is someone who's at a TED stage level. This is somebody who's already hit the New York Times bestseller. This is somebody who's in fireside chats with like Barack Obama Mahohodi, like let's just reel it in a little bit. Okay. I don't have one book out. I'm nervous as fuck before I get on stage. So what are we talking about here? So
Yeah.
number one, making it clear that the distance between you and that person, that's not like some seismic thing that nobody can overcome, right? Number one. But then number two, also, there's a playbook here. This
Yeah.
isn't something that happens just by magic because of Instagram, like Instagram makes us look like everything is just in a microwave. No,
Yes.
we're talking about decades of work.
Decades.
I
Yes.
mean, I know for sure for you, because I did my homework, you began research on the three mothers before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Before you
Yeah.
got pregnant, which everybody wanted to talk about, because here you are talking about the three moms, you're becoming a mom yourself. And it's like, no, honey, like I've been at this before I even got to Cambridge. So
Yeah.
it's not, I'm not saying that to discourage people to say to let the hard work intimidate you. The contrary, the woman
Yes.
who's listening has the receipts, knows
Yes.
how to work hard, but does not see it's opaque on purpose. The
Mm,
publishing world is opaque. The public speaking world is opaque. When we
very.
talk about TV and screen, it's like, how do I get in? Do I
Yeah.
need to go and get a PhD? So my question then is, if
Mm,
you were talking to 19-year-old Anna,
yeah.
and you're about to graduate at Stanford, right?
Mm,
How would you counsel her about how to become a thought leader?
mm,
Go and get this PhD. What
yeah.
does she need to know?
Oh, that's such a great question. When it is, I would have said to myself, what you're envisioning is very possible. And it is not a crazy dream that you write books, tell stories, and get paid to talk about those same stories that you wrote.
Yes.
And so that would be like encouragement. I would have started sooner on
Mm.
social media presence, to be honest, because had I kept track of everything I was doing to build the career that I have right now, I think it would have, one, been really helpful to others. But also so much of today is, it's sad, but it really, a lot of opportunities come from how many people follow you and blah, 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 blah. And especially now that I'm getting into TV and film, that's a question that comes up a lot. And it's a part of our resume. If
Yes.
not more important than our resume is our social media at this point. And so it depends what everyone wants to accomplish. Not everybody wants to have a huge following, but if you want as many doors to open as possible, start right now on keeping track of all of this and get over the nerves a little faster because I knew I had important things to say for a very long time, but I didn't share them with people. I just thought, who am I to do that? Who am I to write a blog? And the reason I started, the very first thing I started that I published was a blog. It was really simple, but I was so nervous the day that I just sat down to write my first thought piece. And I was going to put it up online. And it was if I remember correctly, it was about people pursuing their dreams and how you make something happen and to not wait any longer. Because if you start now, you're ahead of the game already than if you
That
start.
piece is still up on your website, right?
I might be able to find it. I need to find my blog. I need to go and see if I can still find my initial website. But I published that while I was an undergrad and was so nervous, okay, fine, submit, I'm going to do it. Close my computer. And I immediately started getting messages from friends and texts and comments and people saying that was so helpful to me. Thank you for sharing that. And that's when I thought, oh, okay, I can do more of this. I kept publishing the blog. So I'm saying this to break down kind of the steps that
Yes,
it took
please.
for me, but also know that there are so many paths to
Yes.
this career.
Yes.
So this is just the path I took. But after the blog and after I'd posted enough of them, I got an opportunity to submit an op-ed to the Huffington Post.
Mhm.
And I tried submitting different op-eds. You can go online and go to different people's websites, and sometimes they really do get picked up that way. So write a blog, write an op-ed, send it to as many of the publications as possible. And I think through that, an editor got a hold of me and asked if I wanted to write a piece it was about a woman, a trans woman who had been murdered.
Mhm.
And it was such an important piece that I was being asked to do, but I was nervous. I was like, oh, okay, because if I do this, I am going to get a lot of people who are wild, writing in the
Mhm.
comments or saying mean
Mhm.
things. And I also really want to make sure I honor this woman's life with the utmost respect and make sure I do her justice. And so there was so much pressure on this first moment that I was going to be officially published. And I just said, you know what? The leaders that I look up to are brave. And am I trying to be one of them?
Yes.
I am. And Melissa Harris Perry is another person who I didn't mention before, but she really showed me that this idea that I had of being a public intellectual, like I didn't even know that word, those words. I
Mhm.
just knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know it was already a career that people had. She had a TV show and
Yes.
she had the degrees
Yes.
and she also was talking
She's a
to
professor. She's
the public,
yes.
She was
Yes.
educating people in a way that I wanted to. And I thought, oh, I could have a show one day. I could do those things.
Yes.
So anyways, so I thought about her and I thought, she would take this opportunity. I can do this. And so then I just started getting asked to do a lot of op-eds. And when I started my PhD, I knew I wanted to write books. And a lot of people don't know this, but the very first book that I wrote was actually a novel. I wrote a whole novel. It was a very
Okay.
novel. And it was really actually predicting a lot of what happens with Trump. But it was when he was first running for president the very first time. And so I wrote this book that I haven't sold yet, and I think someday I will. That's the other thing. You're going to write a lot of things that don't sell immediately. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean that they won't ever sell, and it doesn't mean that they don't have a role to play in your career. I used that book to find an agent. I asked everybody that I knew, do you know agents? Can you connect me to an agent? I asked my friends and my husband to like tweet about it and like say, Anna's looking for an agent. And it just so happens that my husband's tweet is the reason that my current agent to this day wrote to us and said,
Okay, that's true love.
I think that I have a lot to say about marriage and family, and that's maybe that's for another day. But I do find it so important that as partners, we carry each other's dreams,
Yes,
we do
yes.
everything we can. And for him, it was like, yeah, let me just tweet it. And so she reached out and we started working together. I sent her the novel and she said, "You're an amazing writer."
Hmm.
And novels are harder to sell, to be
Hmm.
honest, because you have to write a whole book and it needs to be perfect.
Yes.
She asked me if I had a nonfiction idea. So I told her I was going to be starting this PhD and I'm researching these three women. And she said, "Great, that's going to be the first proposal." So I worked very hard at that proposal. I'm skipping through some steps, but we then decided to sell, or we sold the Three Mothers while I was still in a PhD program. So it really is like one step just after the other. Take it step by step by step and just trust your instinct. If
Hmm.
something is coming to mind for you that feels like a very obvious idea, especially because a lot of the things that resonate the most with people that I say or do or write, I think are pretty obvious.
Hmm.
And kind of
Hmm.
basic sometimes. I think that I'm saying something that we all already think or that we all already know. And then what I've come to realize is the things that feel obvious to us are the thing we're supposed to share with everybody else. So
Hmm.
I'll wrap that answer up because I know it's been a long one, but for
Good
everybody,
one.
thank you. But too long. For everybody, if you have something that feels really obvious to you and you keep sitting there thinking, why isn't anyone saying this thing?
Hmm.
Anybody doing that? Why hasn't that been written? Probably because you're supposed to be the one to do it.
Oh my God, I love this because we're doing a full circle back to Toni Morrison, who is one of the very first thought leaders that came out of your mouth when I
Yeah.
asked you, who is a thought leader who anchors you, right? The names that you threw out were Toni Morrison, Bell Hooks, Audre
Shakur,
Lorde, um, Walker, Alice Walker.
Shakur.
And the reason why I say Toni Morrison is, I mean, her brilliance is singular and her encouragement, how she came to write The Bluest Eye in the first place, where she said that this book didn't exist and it was painful for me reading all these caricatures of
Yeah.
little black girls in America and being like does nobody here's met a black little girl, like do you know how special we are? And she
Yeah.
was like, no, okay, obviously it's time for me to write. And that's one of her famous quotes: if there's a
Yeah.
book inside of you that you don't see anywhere else, like it's on you.
Yeah.
No. To close, I want to ask you about courage, because one of the things that I appreciate so much in the answer you just gave, that you say is long, but is really fantastic because it grounds us in something meaty and it walks us through where you are right now, right? And what you are becoming. You talk about being nervous, talk
Hmm.
about before sending that first blog, like having flutters. And you also talk, I thought this was so interesting when you're talking about nervousness around reels
Yeah.
and helping everybody understand the importance of social media, that this is part of your resume. And if
Yeah.
you don't get that, like, just put a fine point on that if you're listening. Your social media account, whether you own a business and you want to use thought leadership to drive more eyeballs towards your business that's helping humanity, or you really want to become a New York Times bestseller and a TED speaker, that type of thought leader, taking your social media seriously and as part of your resume and cultivating it that way, that's huge. But
Mhm.
so many people resonate with this idea of, I'm nervous and it is a lot to have eyes on me. That visibility thing can be a real thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Where does courage come from? And it can be about that, but I really want to understand the seed of
Yeah.
courage for you.
Such a beautiful question. I know I've said that many times, but you are a fan.
I will take it. I will take it. I'm taking that. Thank you.
Beautiful. I would say for me, courage. We've talked a little bit about some of the parts of where courage come from for me. One is that I study a lot of courageous people, and that is really at the heart of my work thus far, especially with the Three Mothers and in Erased. Yes, I'm talking about American patriarchy, but more importantly, I'm talking about the people who have stood up to it. And so the book is filled with examples of people who were courageous. And I talk about the things that were hidden from us. The subtitle of it is what American patriarchy has hidden from us. And so one of those things that's been hidden and kind of taken from us is access to our courage and
Mm.
our ability to be nervous. Fear is real. That's not something that you have to deny in yourself. But what do you do with that fear? And of course, Audre Lorde, it's a famous quote. But she says, whether or not I was afraid or whether or not I was sitting in the corner afraid, the system would grind me to dust anyways. That's not a perfect quote, but it's
Yeah.
around that. Um, and basically, she's saying you can either be fearful and do nothing, or you can be fearful and do something. And
Mm.
so I try to be somebody who, even if I'm nervous and I'm a little afraid, I want to do something. And it's the same thing that I tell my kids when they're a little nervous to try something, or, whatever the things are that are normal for kids to be fearful of. I tell them, these are things that this is scary. That's an appropriate reaction. And what are you going to do with that fear? Are you going to try or are you going to keep yourself from something? And there's so many times where I'm saying something to my kids and I'm like, message for myself. Like, let me remember that. And so there's a lot of times where, yes, I was nervous, but I will also say there were also many times where I felt like, why aren't people seeing me? So this is one of the reasons that courage has become really important for me is that I understand erasure because I've experienced it a lot. And particularly, I mean, all women do, all women of color do. We've had many moments where people try to silence us or patronize us or take away our contributions or deny those contributions, all of the above. Like,
Literally not see you in
and
life. I
literally,
don't
yeah,
see
look
you.
past you, push
Yes.
you. Right? We've
Yes.
all experienced these things. And for me in particular, I experienced it because my husband and I met when we were in college. And I
Mm.
think a moment of erasure that happens for a lot of women is often when they're associated to men in a lot of different ways. But if we're thinking about a romantic relationship, and my husband always wanted to create change in his community, and he saw the road to that being running for office. And so at a young age, I was 19, he was 21 when we started dating. And shortly after, he declared that he was going to run for city council of his city. So there was a lot of attention on Michael. And he was the youngest elected city council member in Stockton. He was the youngest mayor 4 years later of an American city in American history, of a major American city.
Wow.
So there were a lot of eyes on him. And immediately we started to see, the erasure of women, not only me, but his mother, his aunt, his grandmother. And I often felt like I was not being seen. And so I also knew when it was my opportunity to be seen and I was going to create these opportunities for myself and I was going to fight that erasure, I also needed to seize those moments. And I couldn't let
Mm.
fear be the thing that kept me from those moments. It couldn't be that I was so nervous that I was going to rob myself of an opportunity when all of these different factors were already trying to keep me from something. So when my TED Talk moment happened, I had just given birth to my daughter about like 12 weeks before my TED Talk. And for anyone who's had a child,
Oh my God, that's crazy.
your brain is operating
That's
differently.
bananas.
And I often say, when I talk about
Wow.
brain, it's not that we have at all a dumber brain at all. The brain is just has reprioritized, and we have a brilliant brain that's just thinking of a lot of other things that have to do with keeping our children alive.
Yes.
Not necessarily the brain that's thinking I can memorize this talk. And you don't have teleprompters with a TED Talk. It's entirely memorized. And I'd had this opportunity, for months before my daughter was born, but I knew leading up to it, I was going to be in this state where I was also nursing her. So I was nervous about a lot of things that might happen on stage. There were a lot of nerves going through my brain. But I also said to myself, Anna, this is your moment to be seen. And it's not only about you, but about what your work can do and what you've wanted to do. You have asked for this, so show up for it. And so, yes, I just stood up there and did my thing. And that's what happens. It was the same with the President Obama moment when I was asked to do this interview, and I was nervous leading up to it, but the day of, I just told myself, this is one of your opportunities that you've asked for. So receive it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that simple mantra for me helps me all the time. I now do so many talks and so many interviews that I really don't get nervous as much as I used to. Because I honestly just don't even have the time for nerves anymore. I'm like running into the next event and running into the next thing. I don't have time to prepare, and it's
It's a
just
strategy.
yeah, it's a way. And sometimes I make mistakes. That's also you accept it. Like it's maybe not always going to be perfect, but
Mm.
I know I can do this,
Yes.
And that's my mantra. This is something you've asked for. You
Mm.
want to communicate with as many people as possible, so receive it.
Mm. That is so beautiful. And it's such a powerful mantra for anybody who is listening. This is something I have prayed for. I have asked for this. Can I receive? Will you receive? Right. And I also want to acknowledge just thank you so much as a fellow mom. Anybody who has gone through, especially that newborn, that 12-week where you're delirious. You don't even have any sleep. You're not even fully human, right? For you to have delivered that and with such grace. And I mean, the crowd goes crazy. They go bananas at the end, as they should, because you were present. You weren't performing something, you weren't trying to be perfect in the moment. You gave us something that felt like real human connection, right? And that I think is one of the most beautiful things about how we get to be thought leaders that is so different from the broken models that we
Mm,
are remaking.
yeah.
And one of the other things that I wanted to close on is the image of you standing on that TED Talk stage, 12 weeks after having given birth, your daughter being the person that you just gave birth to, and
Yeah.
the audacity of showing her this is what courage can look like when we allow ourselves to be seen and when we refuse to be erased. And
You're being
thinking
emotional.
about,
I'm about to cry.
I had chills when you were talking because I can see 7 generations forward and what our great, 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 greats will think when they see that, right? And what they will know about you as an ancestor, as a grandmother, that there's a path. We don't have to do something that's like, oh my God, this is so hard. How do we do this? We
Yeah.
do it in the moments that feel most uncomfortable, that feel most difficult, by
Yeah.
being that kind of light for the new world that's just been born. Like 12
Yeah.
weeks in, are you kidding me?
Thank you. Yeah. In the in between moments, she was with me in the green room and I was,
Of
holding
course, she's
her.
nursing.
I like
I don't
nursed
know
her.
what that is.
I
I
went
got the milk.
Yeah, and we have this really beautiful image of or picture of my husband holding her in his lap, and I'm about to go on stage, and they're miking me up, and she's a little, she's this tiny, tiny baby,
Yeah.
but she's kind of looking towards me, and it's just so. It really is so, so beautiful. And I think there's so many moments as moms where we really have to look back and say, wow,
Yes.
look what I did. Because when you're in the moment, there's a lot of people that are taking for granted what you're doing, to be honest. There's a lot of people who are sort of like, well, what's the big deal? Like you've done it's like,
Mm.
no, you've done something incredible. And that's not just a TED Talk, it's how we are restructuring everything, including our bodies and our minds, to keep this baby alive and thriving. And I do also invite any moms listening to go back and just think of those first 3 months postpartum, the fourth trimester, and
Mm.
just really applaud yourself for everything you did, because it is incredible. It is magnificent. And don't let anybody tell you that your brain wasn't working or that you are dumber. I really despise the ways in which people try to rob the power of mothers. And in the way we discuss so much of what's happening for moms in that fourth trimester, it's so horrible, to be honest, to not honor every single thing that mother does, especially when you have this newborn baby. So I just also want to say it doesn't have to be a TED Talk. What you've done is incredible.
Yes, yes, that is so true. And this conversation has been such a gift, not just to moms, not just to daughters, but to any ears that are listening. It is so rich. There is so much here. Thank you, Anna Malaika Tubbs. I'm tempted to ask you a very, very final question. And I think the best way to do it is a little bit of rapid fire. Um,
Okay. Because you know me with my money.
No, girl, no, because your brain is brilliant and
Thanks.
so much there. Rapid fire, first thought. What is it that you are so, you will die on this hill of this is the thought, this is remember, we were talking about thoughts at the very beginning of our conversation, and you were saying it was a thought in these white men's imagination that the world
Yeah.
should be this way. What
Yeah.
is the equivalent? The thought that is in your imagination that you want 400 years forward for us
Mm.
to be like, oh my God, that's crazy. It was just a thought.
Oh, there's so many ways to answer this question. But I will say this, because we started with American patriarchy, I will end with it.
Yes.
When I talk about American patriarchy and I talk about the opposite of American patriarchy, I am not actually talking about a matriarchy because as
Mhm.
much as I do think we would get to things and solutions faster if we had a matriarchy,
Hello.
what I'm actually advocating for is American democracy. And democracy depends on power being vested in the people, and that means all of the people of a nation. And as we talked about at the very beginning, we have never seen that. We have not experienced that in this nation. We have thus far experienced American patriarchy. So, what I would really love to see, however many years from now, is an actual democracy where everybody can vote. And I would actually institute mandatory voting across the nation.
Okay.
Any barrier
Spicy.
because I really believe that the people of this nation, the majority, would vote very differently. And I think that the other side is showing that they believe that too,
They're
because
scared.
they're going in and they're putting
Scared.
up barriers and they're going in and they're redistricting states. And that to me shows the power of the people. And this is what we're talking about. I think sometimes these statements that have been passed down to us, we start to think are so cliche. No, what we really do need to emphasize is the power of the people. And we're not ever going to see that nor live in a fully true democracy unless we get to hear what everybody here has to say. And I have a lot of faith that that could eventually happen. We're seeing mandatory voting start in other places across the world. And I just think it could be really revolutionary.
Okay, another mic drop. Just totally took it all. That is brilliant. Um, Again, I cannot thank you enough. This conversation has been so beautiful, so rich, and we the people.
Thank
We
you.
the people. There's a reason why autocrats fear us so much and why they use fear to control us. Because
Yes.
they fear us and the
They-
power that is we the people.
yes.
Think on that. Think
Such
on
a perfect way to end it.
that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here at Madam Speaker Says. If you are keen to continue this conversation, if you would like to continue what we have started here, and you see yourself, especially as a thought leader, I have a quiz and it's pretty delicious. It walks you through the different kinds of thought leadership that exist. What kind of thought leader are you? Are you somebody who is just like Anna Malaika Tubbs? Are you modeling your thought leadership on this kind of brilliance? Take the quiz, find out what kind of thought leader you are, and I hope that you use what is inside of both this conversation and the quiz to activate, right? To get really busy and to begin walking that path. Anna walked us through all the steps that she took to become a thought leader. You got next, but you have to take the action. All of the details, if you're curious about the quiz, are in the show notes. It is so beautiful to have you here. Thank you. I'm going to sign off, and I want to thank especially our guest today, who's been remarkable and astounding. Please make sure, if you don't already have a copy of Erased, listen, I can forgive you if you don't have a copy of Erased, but if you don't have a copy of The Three Mothers on your nightstand, or that you borrowed out, or that your mom, like you gifted it to your mom, pause right now and go to where you go to go and get your books and do the right thing. Get Anna's book, Erased. Make sure you're following her on all of the socials, right? Anna, your social handle?
Yes, Anna Malaika Tubbs on Instagram, and my website's annamalaikatubbs.com.
And all of that will be available, obviously, in show notes. You need to follow her. It's part of her resume. So you got to support, and you have to
Support
get the
me.
books. You have to get the books. Thank you again for being here with us. We will see you next week, Sunday, on another episode of Madam Speaker Says. Hey, pull up. Just you and me for a second. Are you an exec, a founder, or an entrepreneur who's sick of shrinking in rooms you're overqualified to lead? It's time to stop playing small and start owning your expertise. But how, Machochodi? Girl, I got you. I offer coaching that helps women of color just like you to claim your place as a thought leader. Whether you want to command a room, craft and share your signature story, or finally get that book out of your head and onto bookshelves, I've got the strategy and spicy accountability that you need. If you're tired of seeing less qualified folks shine while you stay behind the scenes, girl, the wait list is open. Follow the link in show notes to stop waiting for permission and claim your VIP spot now. My mission? Helping women just like you to snatch the spotlight, shake the table, and take your damn seat at the top already. No begging, no detours, and nope, no apologies. Just bold ass moves.